black woman dragged off. First-class seat CEO flies in personally to apologize. They say that in the quiet moments when we least expect it, the world can reveal its cruelest faces and its most heroic. On a seemingly ordinary flight to Los Angeles, an arrogant pilot singles out a young black girl for daring to sit in the seat her grandmother rightfully purchased in first class. In seconds, the cabin fills with tension that cracks the atmosphere more sharply than any turbulence. Yet just as swiftly, an unexpected champion steps forward, a regal grandmother with a secret power that will shake not only that flight, but also the entire airline industry. Buckle up, this journey is only beginning. Clarissa Davenport began her day well before dawn, savoring a cup of coffee by her bedroom window. Outside, the sky was draped in hushed twilight, and her mind teemed with thoughts of an upcoming flight to Los Angeles. A self-made entrepreneur, she had overcome countless barriers, channeling every triumph into a promise her granddaughter Emily would have a brighter future. 13-year-old Emily, bursting with boundless energy, adored dancing. Posters of legendary performers covered her bedroom walls, and she practiced pirouettes on wooden floors whenever the mood struck. Her parents worked overseas in humanitarian projects, so Emily lived under Clarissa's care. Together, they formed an unbreakable bond, one fueled by Emily's dreams and her grandmother's unwavering dedication. This particular morning, they prepared for a flight that would take Emily to a prestigious performing arts audition, an opportunity that could transform her raw talent into a professional career. Clarissa's heart swelled with pride whenever she saw Emily's spirited determination. She remembered her own humble beginnings and the prejudice she once faced. She gently inhaled, yet here in the quiet of morning, she sensed the promise of a grand new chapter, one brimming with hope, even if fate had unexpected surprises in store ahead. Clarissa Davenport's success had been built on two pillars: unyielding grit and a deep desire to uplift others. Raised in a segregated southern town, she knew well the sting of prejudice, and she vowed to use her future wealth for good. Over decades, her investments flourished, enabling her to establish scholarships, sponsor youth programs, and fund humanitarian missions. Yet beneath her polished demeanor lay a fierce resolve, particularly when it came to her granddaughter, Emily. Though Emily's parents served overseas in relief work, the girl thrived under Clarissa's guidance, understanding that genuine respect transcended mere financial privilege. On the morning of their flight to Los Angeles, the hum of Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport invigorated Emily, who relished the bustle of rolling suitcases and overhead announcements. Her eyes lit up at the gate where business travelers typed away on laptops and families corralled restless toddlers. For Emily, each airport visit signaled new adventures, especially today, with her upcoming audition at a prestigious performing arts school. Unbeknownst to them, Captain Jack Hallenbeck had just arrived. Tall and seemingly composed, he wore his Delta pilot's stripes with an authoritative air. Beneath his professional exterior, however, simmered a latent bitterness fueled by a recent divorce and lingering biases he refused to confront. Spotting Emily and Clarissa preparing to board first class, he felt a vexing sense of growing resentment. In his mind, certain people simply did not belong there. He gripped the flight manifest, tightly pushing away old voices in his head that urged him to act on his prejudice. Despite the tension building within him, he reminded himself to maintain a professional facade. Yet his mind swirled. Soon, though, this internal storm would inevitably surface, setting the stage for a confrontation that would test not only his career, but the fundamental dignity of everyone involved. The gate agent announced first-class boarding for flight 1145. Clarissa and Emily gathered their carry-on bags and stepped onto the short priority line. Emily bounced on the balls of her feet, her floral dress swaying. A few business travelers gave her indulgent smiles, recalling memories of traveling as children themselves. Clarissa, ever vigilant, noticed a tall figure in a pilot's uniform, standing behind the gate desk, eyes trained on them. She met his gaze briefly and offered a courteous nod, receiving only a cold stare in return. They scanned their boarding passes and walked down the jet bridge. Emily's excitement crescendoed as she entered the Boeing 737, the cold, pressurized air hitting her face. A flight attendant named Marjorie greeted them, guiding them to seats 2A and 2B on the left side of the aisle. Marjorie had a warm smile and a maternal demeanor that immediately put Emily at ease. As Emily settled into her window seat, she marveled at the spacious legroom, the large, comfortable seat, and the screen embedded in the seat back ahead. "Grandma, look at all this space," Emily exclaimed softly, trying not to disturb other first-class passengers. Clarissa returned her granddaughter's grin. "Enjoy it, sweetie. You'll have a good rest on the flight." Marjorie approached to offer pre-flight beverages, orange juice for Emily, sparkling water for Clarissa. They thanked her, and Emily continued exploring every feature of her seat, from the adjustable headrest to the entertainment controls. Clarissa checked her emails briefly, then turned her phone to airplane mode. She also felt a silent relief, hoping that the pilot's odd stare at the gate was nothing more than a momentary quirk. Moments before the cabin door closed, Captain Hallenbeck made his standard pre-flight walk through the cabin. He gave curt nods to the first-class passengers, briefly acknowledging them. But when he reached row 2, he paused. His gaze lingered on Emily, then flicked to Clarissa. The manner of his stare was unsettling, as if he were appraising them with an air of disdain. In that instant, Emily felt a twinge of discomfort. She was used to traveling and had seen many pilots, but none had looked at her with such pointed scrutiny. She tried to remind herself that he was just the pilot making final checks, yet the acidity in his gaze didn't feel routine. Clarissa felt it too. Her posture stiffened, but she maintained her composure, returning his stare with a polite, neutral expression. She had weathered enough discrimination in her life to recognize it. Still, she hoped she was mistaken. Surely a professional pilot wouldn't act on any bigotry mid-flight. "Good morning, Captain Hallenbeck," said his tone brisk. "I'm Captain Hallenbeck. We'll be departing soon. Flight attendants, prepare for takeoff." He pivoted sharply and walked back toward the cockpit. Marjorie and a couple of other flight attendants exchanged uneasy glances. No one said a word, and the boarding door soon closed. The aircraft began its pushback from the gate. As the plane taxied out to the runway, Clarissa leaned over to Emily. "You doing all right?" she asked softly, noticing Emily's anxious fidgeting. Emily gave a tentative nod. "Grandma, did you notice how that pilot looked at us? It's like he was mad or something." Clarissa placed a reassuring hand on Emily's arm. "I did, baby. Sometimes people carry burdens or prejudices that have nothing to do with us. Don't let it ruin your flight." "Okay." Emily took a deep breath. "Okay," she murmured, turning to gaze out the window. She watched the runway lights blur as the engines roared to life. The plane accelerated, and soon they were airborne, ascending into a clear morning sky. In the first few minutes of flight, Emily closed her eyes, allowing the calming hum of the engines to soothe her nerves. She thought about her upcoming interview, envisioning herself in a pristine dance studio with bright mirrors delivering the performance of her life. For Emily, dance was more than just technique. It was expression, freedom, and storytelling. She couldn't imagine a future without it. Clarissa watched Emily, drifting toward a half-doze, and felt a surge of affection. She also felt the old familiar fire that ignited whenever she sensed Emily could be in danger of discrimination. Over the years, Clarissa had tackled many such incidents, whether from Emily's former ballet instructor, who seemed to give Emily fewer solos, or the rude remarks from strangers who questioned the presence of a black family at a private beach club. Each time, Clarissa responded with dignity and determination, often surprising the offenders who had no clue of her influence or her willingness to fight back. For the first hour, the flight proceeded smoothly. Marjorie rolled out a cart with drinks and snacks for the first-class cabin. Emily chose a ginger ale and a small pack of cookies, while Clarissa went for tea. They engaged in light conversation with a friendly passenger across the aisle. A young woman heading to Los Angeles for a film editing workshop. The conversation lifted Emily's spirits. She momentarily forgot about the pilot's unsettling demeanor. Clarissa took out her tablet to catch up on some reading. She was engrossed in an article about emerging African dance troupes when Emily gently tugged her sleeve. "Grandma." "Can I walk to the lavatory?" Emily asked. Clarissa nodded. "Sure. Are you okay going by yourself?" Emily grinned. "Yeah, I'm just going right there," she said, pointing to the front of the cabin. Clarissa smiled back. "Go ahead." Emily slipped out of her seat and walked up the aisle. The forward lavatory was occupied, so she waited patiently. When the door opened, a passenger stepped out and Emily prepared to go in. At that exact moment, the cockpit door slid open and Captain Hallenbeck emerged, nearly colliding with Emily. "What are you doing up here?" he asked, his tone sharper than necessary. Emily, startled, stepped back. I was waiting for the bathroom," she stammered, pointing at the lavatory. His eyes narrowed, taking in her floral dress and youthful features. "This lavatory is for first class," he said, emphasizing first class as though Emily didn't belong there. Emily blinked. "I'm sitting in first class, sir." There was a taut silence. Captain Hallenbeck's jaw flexed, and he glanced toward the rows of seats as if double-checking. "You're with that woman, correct?" he asked, gesturing vaguely. Emily nodded, her heart pounding. "My grandmother," she said quietly. The pilot's face tightened. "Hurry up then, and no wandering, okay?" "Yes, sir," Emily replied, stepping into the lavatory, her cheeks burning with indignation. The door clicked shut behind her. Outside, Captain Hallenbeck stood there for a moment, evidently unsettled by the child's presence. After a few beats, he shook his head and returned to the cockpit. He reminded himself he was a professional, he couldn't risk an outburst. But his prejudice simmered just below the surface, waiting for the slightest provocation to erupt. Inside the tiny lavatory, Emily found herself momentarily overwhelmed. She was old enough to sense the hostile undertone in his words. Even at 13, she had encountered occasional moments of bias or suspicion, but rarely so pointed, and never from someone as authoritative as an airline pilot. She splashed some water on her face, trying to calm herself. When she emerged, she walked quickly back to her seat, shoulders tense. Clarissa, noticing her granddaughter's expression, asked, "Everything okay?" Emily bit her lip. "He stopped me from using the bathroom." Clarissa's eyebrows shot up in concern. Who did Emily explained quietly what had happened? Clarissa's expression darkened, but she kept her voice level, determined not to alarm Emily further. "Thank you for telling me. Next time, if the forward lavatory is open, you use it without question." "Understood." Emily nodded. Understood. Clarissa gave her a comforting pat on the hand. Inside, however, she was seething. She resolved to handle this if it escalated. For Emily's sake, she hoped the rest of the flight would pass without further confrontation. Another half-hour passed. The plane cruised smoothly at 35,000 feet. Marjorie came around again this time to collect trash. She cast a sympathetic glance at Emily, who was trying to watch an in-flight movie, but couldn't entirely concentrate. Clarissa, noticing Marjorie's concerned look, inclined her head in greeting. "Is everything all right with your granddaughter?" Marjorie asked politely. Clarissa's eyes flicked toward the cockpit door. She had a bit of an uncomfortable exchange with the pilot. Marjorie's cheeks reddened. "I'm so sorry to hear that." "Ma'am, if you need anything, water, a blanket, or if you feel uncomfortable, please let me know. We want you to have a good flight." Clarissa appreciated the gesture. "Thank you, Marjorie. I do appreciate your kindness." As Marjorie moved on to the next row, Clarissa took note of how the other first-class passengers were behaving. A few seemed oblivious, lost in their reading or phone games, but some had that awkward tension in their faces, perhaps having sensed some friction in the cabin. No one openly confronted the pilot, of course. Such direct conflicts mid-flight were rare and generally discouraged. People valued their safety and relative peace, even if it sometimes meant ignoring wrongdoing. Clarissa understood that mentality, but she also knew that ignoring prejudice only allowed it to fester. She resolved if the pilot pushed again, she would not remain silent. Sensing Emily's lingering disquiet, Clarissa decided to share a short story from her past one that might inspire her granddaughter. She leaned over and said softly, "Emily, did I ever tell you about the time I couldn't eat at a diner when I was about your age?" Emily shook her head. "No, Grandma." Clarissa took a breath. "Back then we were living in a town that still had a lot of discrimination. One afternoon, my dad took me to get an ice cream sundae. But the man at the counter refused to serve me, told me to stand outside and wait. My dad, as proud as he was, simply walked us out of there. We never went back." Emily frowned. "That's awful." Clarissa nodded. "It was. But it taught me that some folks haven't caught up with the idea that we all deserve the same respect. Now times have changed for the better, mostly. But we still encounter people who cling to old, ugly ideas. You have to be ready to stand up for yourself, or let me stand up for you until you're ready." Emily smiled, tears glimmering in her eyes. "Thank you, Grandma. I love you." Clarissa smiled back, patting Emily's hand gently. "I love you too, sweetheart. Always remember that your worth isn't determined by someone else's ignorance." While Clarissa comforted Emily, Captain Hallenbeck sat in the cockpit, attempting to refocus on the routine tasks of piloting. The co-pilot First Officer Emma Brandt noticed his uncharacteristic tension. She had flown with him before and knew he could be prickly, but today he seemed on edge. At one point, while Hallenbeck input flight coordinates, Brandt asked, "Everything okay?" "You seem more stressed than usual." He exhaled sharply, eyes scanning the instrument panel. "Just personal stuff," he replied brusquely. He didn't elaborate, and Brandt decided not to push the matter. Pilots often carried personal burdens, but it rarely affected the flight in such an obvious way. She made a mental note to keep an eye on him. Hallenbeck's thoughts, however, kept drifting back to that child in first class. Something about her presence, and especially that older woman's calm, dignified demeanor, irked him. In his mind, he rationalized it as being protective of the flight's security. But if he were honest with himself, it was a product of the narrow-minded convictions he had absorbed growing up, that certain people didn't belong in certain spaces, especially if they did not conform to his biases of how wealth and status should look. Every time he tried to bury the anger, it bubbled back up. He knew he was risking trouble, but it was as if he couldn't help himself. The sense of entitlement he attributed to them, ironically ignoring the fact that they had legitimately purchased first-class tickets, became an obsession he couldn't shake. If an opportunity arose, he would find a way to express his dominance. About 2 hours into the flight, Emily felt restless. She had watched part of a movie but couldn't concentrate. She needed to stretch her legs. Clarissa, also feeling a bit stiff, offered to accompany her. They slipped past the curtain separating first class from economy. Emily wanted to see how different economy was. She had flown economy many times in the past, but her memory was patchy. Indeed, the rows behind the curtain were tighter seats closer together, and the aisles more crowded with people trying to move about. A flight attendant in economy noticed them and politely said, "Hello, folks. The first-class restroom is up front if you need it. Would you like me to help you find a seat or something?" Clarissa smiled kindly. "We're just stretching our legs, thank you." The attendant nodded, though Clarissa noticed a fleeting look of confusion on the attendant's face. Perhaps she rarely saw first-class passengers meander back here. Emily and Clarissa only lingered a moment, then turned around to head back to their seats. As they approached the front, the cockpit door opened once more, and out stepped Captain Hallenbeck. His eyes immediately landed on Emily and Clarissa. "Why are you roaming the cabin?" he asked loud enough for several passengers in the first rows to hear. Clarissa bristled. "Excuse me, you have seats in first class, correct?" The pilot persisted. "Then stay there. We don't want any confusion or security risks." Clarissa's cheeks burned, but she forced a calm tone. "My granddaughter and I are allowed to walk about the plane, Captain. We just took a short stroll as many passengers do." He took a step closer, lowering his voice, but keeping his tone menacing. "Not on my watch. If you cause a disturbance, you'll have to move to economy, or I might have you removed from this flight entirely." A hush fell over that section of the cabin. Clarissa felt every eye on them. Emily, trembling, clutched her grandmother's hand. Captain Clarissa said icily, "We have paid first-class tickets. We are not causing a disturbance. If you continue to harass us, I will speak to the proper authorities the moment we land, or sooner if necessary." Captain Hallenbeck's face twitched. For a split second, it appeared he might retort with something even harsher. But a flight attendant scurried over and placed a light hand on his shoulder. "Captain, the cockpit needs you," she murmured urgently. With a final glare, he turned on his heel and stomped back into the cockpit. Clarissa exhaled, trying to quell the rage building inside her. She guided Emily back to their seats, her heart pounding. Once they were settled, Emily's tears began to fall. "It's okay, baby," Clarissa whispered, hugging her granddaughter. "It's going to be okay." The entire first-class cabin was in stunned silence. A man seated across from them cleared his throat. "That pilot. He's out of line," he said, quietly, leaning over. "I'm Richard Holbrook," he introduced himself. "I'm a lawyer. I saw what happened. If you need any legal counsel, I'd be happy to help." Clarissa gave him a polite nod. "Thank you, Mr. Holbrook. I may take you up on that." A woman in the row behind them who wore a stylish business suit also chimed in. That was blatant harassment. No one should be treated like that. Clarissa glanced around, realizing that while many were disturbed, Few had spoken up until the pilot left. She wasn't surprised. In enclosed environments like an airplane, people often avoided direct confrontation with anyone who had authority. Still, the trickle of support was comforting. She appreciated that Emily could see she wasn't alone, that some bystanders cared enough to speak. Marjorie, the sympathetic flight attendant, soon arrived at their row, offering Emily a tissue and a soft blanket. "I'm so sorry about this," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "Captain Hallenbeck can be difficult. Please let me know if you need anything." Clarissa nodded, placing a protective arm around Emily. "I just want my granddaughter to be able to fly without being terrified. That's all." Marjorie's eyes grew misty. "I understand," she replied, then moved on to continue her duties. As if reflecting the emotional turmoil in the cabin, the plane soon encountered mild turbulence. The seatbelt sign dinged on. The pilot's voice crackled over the loudspeaker, instructing everyone to remain seated. Clarissa wondered what he might say, if he would address the confrontation in some subtle or unprofessional way, but the announcement was purely procedural. Emily clutched the armrest. "Grandma, do you think we'll be safe when we land?" she whispered. Clarissa kissed her temple. "Yes, sweetheart. We'll be safe. We haven't done anything wrong. Remember that." The turbulence escalated for several minutes, causing the cabin to shake. Flight attendants strapped themselves in. Overhead, bins rattled. Emily closed her eyes, trying to breathe through the bumps. Finally, the ride smoothed out again, and the seatbelt sign turned off. Passengers let out collective sighs of relief, though the tension around Emily and Clarissa remained. With about an hour left in the flight, the plane began its gradual descent into Los Angeles. Usually this period is relatively calm, with passengers storing away their belongings and flight attendants preparing for landing. But the hush in first class was uneasily broken when Captain Hallenbeck emerged one final time, as if determined to assert his will before the journey ended. He stopped by Clarissa and Emily, ignoring the stares of other passengers. "I've received a complaint that you two have been bothering other travelers," he declared, voice taut. Clarissa inhaled sharply. "That's preposterous," she replied calmly. "You know very well we haven't caused any disturbance." Emily's lower lip quivered, but she remained silent, pressing against her grandmother's side. The pilot shrugged, feigning nonchalance. "Well, if that's so, you have nothing to worry about. However, I'll remind you that disobeying crew instructions can result in federal charges." At this, Richard Holbrook stood from his seat. "Captain, you're harassing them. I've been watching this entire flight. There is no basis for your accusations." Hallenbeck shot him a withering glare. "Sir, sit down," he snapped. "This is between me and those passengers." "It most certainly is not," Richard retorted. "I'm a licensed attorney, and if you continue, you'll have a lawsuit on your hands and possibly an FAA investigation." The pilot's face turned a deeper shade of red, but a flight attendant interceded again. "Captain, we're preparing for landing. Please let's have everyone seated." With a furious huff, Hallenbeck returned to the cockpit. Clarissa exchanged a grateful look with Richard, who gave her a reassuring nod. The entire cabin was silent as the wheels lowered and the plane touched down at LAX. When the aircraft taxied to its gate, instead of the usual quick deplaning process, an announcement crackled over the speakers. "Ladies and gentlemen, please remain seated. We have a brief procedural check. Thank you for your cooperation." Clarissa's heart sank. She suspected Captain Hallenbeck had escalated the situation further, perhaps by filing a false complaint that Emily and Clarissa were unruly passengers. Sure enough, 2 uniformed airport security officers and a Delta supervisor boarded shortly after. They walked directly to Clarissa and Emily's row. "Ma'am," said the supervisor, whose name tag read Denise Morales, "could you please step off the plane with us for a moment? We'd like to clarify a report the captain has made." Clarissa glanced at Emily, who was on the verge of tears. Before Clarissa could reply, Richard Holbrook rose again. "This is nonsense. I'm coming too. I'll vouch for them." Several other passengers murmured agreement, some standing up as well. Marjorie, the flight attendant, hurried down the aisle. "These passengers did nothing wrong," she insisted, addressing the security officers. "It was the captain who harassed them the entire flight." Officer Kim, one of the security officials, raised a calming hand. "All right, everyone, please calm down. We just need to gather statements." With Emily holding her hand tightly, Clarissa nodded, maintaining her poise. "We'll come. Thank you, everyone, for your support." Together, Clarissa, Emily, Richard, and Marjorie followed the supervisor and the security officers off the plane. The hush in the cabin broke into anxious chatter as soon as they disappeared into the jet bridge. In a small seating area near the gate, Officer Kim and Denise Morales began asking questions. Captain Hallenbeck lingered several yards away, arms folded, glaring at everyone. His co-pilot, Emma Brandt, stood awkwardly behind him, as if not sure where to position herself. Denise Morales spoke first, addressing Clarissa. "Ma'am, the captain claims you and your granddaughter were walking through the cabin without permission and refusing to comply with crew instructions." "Is that accurate, Clarissa?" Her voice, steady, replied. "Absolutely not." We walked to the economy section briefly to stretch our legs, which is allowed. The pilot confronted us multiple times without cause. Richard Holbrook stepped in. "I can confirm her account. I was seated in first class row 3. At no point did Mrs. Davenport or her granddaughter do anything disruptive. The only aggressor was Captain Hallenbeck." Marjorie nodded vigorously. "Yes, ma'am. I'm a flight attendant on that flight. I witnessed the pilot harassing them. This is not the first time we've had complaints about the captain's behavior." Denise Morales exchanged a look with Officer Kim, who then turned to the pilot. "Captain, do you have any evidence for your accusations?" Captain Hallenbeck's jaw tightened. "I saw them in the economy cabin, possibly causing a disturbance. I have the authority to question them. They refused to follow my instructions to remain seated." Clarissa frowned. "We were never told not to walk around. Passengers do that all the time." Officer Kim regarded the pilot carefully. "Captain, multiple witnesses, including your own flight attendant, contradict your statement. Given that no other passengers corroborate your story, we'll need a formal incident report from you, but it appears there's no cause for further action against Mrs. Davenport or her granddaughter." Denise Morales, suddenly looking quite apologetic, turned to Clarissa. "Ma'am, on behalf of Delta, I offer my sincere apologies. This situation should never have occurred. We value your business, and we will investigate this matter thoroughly." Clarissa, fighting to keep her composure, gave a curt nod. "Thank you. I'll be speaking to my legal counsel and also to Delta's higher management. What happened today was completely unacceptable. My granddaughter has been traumatized." Emily sniffled, leaning against her grandmother. The entire ordeal, being singled out, threatened with removal, and now questioned, had worn her down. Captain Hallenbeck glared at them but kept silent. The tension in his eyes suggested he knew he had overstepped, yet he refused to admit it. Once the official conversation ended, Clarissa and Emily were finally free to leave. They collected their luggage from the carousel, with Richard and Marjorie accompanying them for moral support. Marjorie had tears in her eyes, as she hugged Emily goodbye. "I'm sorry you had to go through that, sweetie. You're such a lovely child. Please don't let one bad person make you think the whole world is like him." Emily nodded, her voice small. "Thank you, Miss Marjorie." Richard handed Clarissa his business card. "Call me any time. I'll gladly represent you if you decide to pursue legal action. No family, let alone a child, should endure that on a flight they paid for." Clarissa accepted the card gratefully. "Thank you, Mr. Holbrook. I'll be in touch." When they were finally alone, Clarissa guided Emily outside, where a private car service waited. Emily slumped in the back seat, tears rolling down her cheeks. "Grandma, I hate that this happened," she whispered, voice trembling. "Did we do something wrong?" Clarissa's heart twisted at the question. She reached over and squeezed Emily's hand. "No, baby. We didn't. Sometimes ignorant people try to turn their issues into our problem. But you saw how people stepped in for us. That's proof that not everyone thinks like him." Emily nodded, though her face still showed the hurt. The car merged into Los Angeles traffic, heading toward a hotel near Beverly Hills, where they would be staying for the week. Little did Emily know her grandmother was already planning a powerful form of retribution, one that would ensure no other passenger would experience such bigotry on that aircraft ever again. That evening in their plush hotel suite, Clarissa made phone calls. First, she reached out to her personal assistant in Atlanta, instructing them to gather all the relevant details: video evidence, flight records, witness statements. Next, she contacted her legal team, describing the incident in full. The attorneys confirmed that Captain Hallenbeck's actions could be grounds for a harassment lawsuit and possibly a civil rights violation claim. Finally, Clarissa placed a more unusual call to a contact at an aviation brokerage firm. She had heard rumors that the particular Boeing 737 they flew on tail number N8445DS was nearing a lease renewal. Delta sometimes rotated older aircraft out of its main fleet. Clarissa had the resources to purchase entire planes, thanks to her stake in Davenport Skies. In her mind, an idea began to crystallize. She would buy that specific plane, refurbish it under Davenport Skies, and use it for her expanding philanthropic projects. She envisioned a scenario where Emily and other children, especially those from disadvantaged backgrounds, could someday fly on that plane free of discriminatory baggage. The irony made her smile. The same aircraft where Emily had been told she didn't belong in first class would soon belong to Emily's family. If that wasn't justice, Clarissa didn't know what was. Amid all the turmoil, the reason they had come to Los Angeles, Emily's audition and interview at the Performing Arts School, remained a priority. Clarissa was determined not to let the pilot's bigotry overshadow Emily's aspirations. The next morning, they arrived at the Arts Academy, which was housed in a sprawling complex with dance studios, music halls, and a small theater. Emily was visibly anxious, but Clarissa offered warm reassurance. "Remember what you love about dancing," she said, smoothing Emily's hair. "Let that guide you, the admissions panel." 3 individuals with backgrounds in dance, drama, and music welcomed Emily into the audition room. Clarissa waited outside in a comfortable lounge area, refusing to let her own frustrations intrude on Emily's big day. Emily performed a contemporary dance piece she had practiced for weeks. She also delivered a short monologue from a classic play, then sang a verse from a Broadway number. The entire session lasted about half an hour, but to Emily it felt like seconds. She poured her heart into each movement, each line, each note. When she rejoined Clarissa, Emily was breathless and euphoric. "They loved it," she gasped, a bright smile lighting her face. At least I think they did. They said my expression was powerful. Clarissa embraced her. I'm so proud of you, sweetheart. No matter the result, you've already won by giving it your all. They returned to the hotel, Emily floating on a cloud of hope. For a moment, she forgot about the flight incident. Her mind brimmed with the possibilities that awaited if she were accepted into the academy. The incident on Flight 1145 did not remain in the shadows. Several passengers had recorded snippets of the pilot's confrontations on their phones. Within days, short clips appeared on social media. One particularly telling video captured the pilot's heated words. If you cause a disturbance, you'll move to economy directed at Emily. The clip quickly went viral, especially on platforms that highlighted issues of racial bias and discrimination. Outrage grew as netizens demanded accountability. The story was picked up by local Atlanta news outlets, then by national blogs. The headlines were sensational pilot yells at black girl in first class, grandmother threatens legal action. While Clarissa had not personally leaked the story, she recognized the public outcry could bolster her own push for justice. Delta, sensing a PR disaster, launched an internal investigation. Captain Hallenbeck was placed on paid administrative leave pending the outcome. The airline issued a lukewarm statement about valuing diversity and taking all complaints seriously. But many found it insufficient given the severity of the accusations. During this time, Clarissa remained relatively silent in public. She and Emily focused on Emily's prospective school, while her attorneys handled communications with Delta. In private, however, Clarissa's plan to acquire the plane that had carried them to LA progressed rapidly. She quietly negotiated with an aircraft leasing company that partnered with Delta, ensuring that if the airline decided to restore or sell that specific plane, Davenport Skies would be the first buyer in line. To understand why Clarissa could pull off such a purchase, one must grasp the scope of Davenport Skies. Originally a modest charter company, it was acquired by Clarissa some years back. She rebranded and expanded it into a multifaceted aviation service, offering corporate charters, humanitarian flights, and cargo routes to underserved areas. She poured significant resources into its humanitarian wing, which transported medical supplies and volunteers to remote regions after natural disasters or during health crises. The philanthropic aspect was deeply personal to Clarissa, who believed strongly in using her success to uplift others. She often visited these remote landing strips herself, greeting refugees or impoverished communities with a warm smile and necessary supplies. The possibility of adding a Boeing 737 to this fleet excited her. It would enable Davenport Skies to carry more cargo and more volunteers, drastically improving their outreach. Now it was more than just an upgrade to the philanthropic fleet. It was a statement. Clarissa wanted Emily to see that prejudice could be overturned, that they had the power to transform what had been a traumatic space into a vessel of hope. About a week after the audition, Emily and Clarissa received a phone call from the Performing Arts Academy's admissions office. The voice on the other end said, "We were thoroughly impressed with Emily's talent and passion. We're pleased to offer her admission with a partial scholarship." Emily squealed in delight, dancing around the living room of their suite. Clarissa's face beamed with pride. The victory felt doubly sweet in light of the recent challenges. Emily's acceptance affirmed that not even a hateful encounter could derail her dreams. That evening, they celebrated with a nice dinner at a local restaurant. Over dessert, Emily asked Grandma, "What's going to happen with that pilot?" "Now," Clarissa sighed, stirring her tea. "I'm not certain, but Delta is investigating. Hopefully they'll do the right thing." Emily stared at the flickering candle on the table, her eyes reflecting a mix of relief and lingering sadness. "I'm happy about the school, but I still feel like something needs to be done so he doesn't do this to someone else." Clarissa reached out and touched Emily's hand. "Trust me, baby. Something is being done." Behind the scenes, Delta's internal investigation unearthed multiple complaints against Captain Hallenbeck. From over the years, most were minor, but displayed a pattern of disrespectful behavior. The new allegations, coupled with the viral video, left the airline little choice but to terminate his employment. They quietly informed him that his contract would not be renewed, citing a breach of professional standards and passenger safety concerns. Captain Hallenbeck, in denial and furious, threatened to sue for wrongful termination. He attempted to cast himself as the victim, claiming political correctness had run amok. A handful of extremist figures online supported him, but the broader public outcry drowned out any defense he tried to muster. The reality was simple: his behavior had been indefensible. Meanwhile, Delta's legal team reached out to Clarissa's attorneys to settle. They offered compensation and a formal apology. Clarissa refused the initial offers, insisting that the apology be made public and that Delta strengthen their anti-discrimination policies. Negotiations continued, but she had leverage thanks to the public nature of the incident and her personal resources. Roughly a month after the incident, Clarissa received the final paperwork. The Boeing 737 tail number N844DS was being sold off by the leasing company that Delta had partnered with. Clarissa's purchase of the plane closed swiftly, facilitated by Davenport Sky's legal and financial framework. Overnight, the aircraft changed hands from Delta's routine commercial use to Clarissa's personal and philanthropic enterprise. When Emily heard the news, her eyes widened in disbelief. "Grandma, you bought the plane, the actual plane we flew on?" Clarissa nodded, smiling. "Yes, sweetheart. I told you we'd make sure no one else would have to face that pilot's bigotry on that aircraft." Emily's mouth fell open. She recalled the cramped seat where her tears had fallen, the overhead lights that felt harsh under the pilot's scrutiny, and the sense of dread that enveloped her as she was targeted. Now that same plane belonged to them, soon to be repainted and refurbished to carry humanitarian aid and hope. Davenport Skies wasted no time in rebranding the plane. Over the next few weeks, the aircraft underwent interior renovations. New seats were installed, the overhead bins were upgraded, and the in-flight entertainment system was modernized. But Clarissa's proudest addition was a large plaque just inside the main cabin door. "This aircraft is dedicated to the spirit of courage and equality. May all who board find dignity, safety, and respect." On the fuselage, bold new lettering spelled out Davenport Skies. The tail was adorned with the company's soaring dove logo, a symbol of peace and humanitarian outreach. To Clarissa, it was more than cosmetic. It was a transformation of a place that once harbored fear into a vessel of compassion. Word began to spread in aviation circles. A wealthy philanthropist had purchased a commercial jet to turn it into a humanitarian aircraft, all sparked by an incident of in-flight discrimination. Invitations for interviews trickled in from major media outlets, but Clarissa granted only a few, focusing on the plane's future mission rather than the pilot's downfall. Captain Hallenbeck spent his final weeks at Delta using up his accrued leave. When the termination became final, he scrambled to find employment with other carriers, but the news had circulated widely. His record of passenger harassment and the viral video left him nearly unemployable in commercial aviation. He ended up taking a job as a private flight instructor at a small airfield, earning a fraction of his former salary. Some might call this outcome karma. Others simply saw it as the natural result of bigoted actions in a modern workplace. Whichever the case, Captain Hallenbeck found himself relegated to training novices in single-engine Cessnas rather than commanding a major airline flight. He harbored deep resentment, but there was no recourse. The world had little tolerance for such archaic prejudice, particularly when inflicted upon a child. A crisp, sunny day dawned at Los Angeles International Airport, chosen as the site where Clarissa would unveil the refurbished 737. The newly christened plane gleamed under the California sun. The event included a small ceremony attended by Davenport Sky's staff, a handful of philanthropic partners, and a group of children from an LA youth center that Clarissa supported. Emily stood at her grandmother's side, a living testament to the reason behind this transformation. She wore a simple white dress, her posture poised, her eyes shining with excitement. Clarissa gave a short speech before the assembled crowd and a few reporters. Sometimes discrimination rears its head in places we least expect. When my granddaughter and I boarded a flight to Los Angeles, we never imagined we would face overt hostility. But adversity can lead to renewal if we seize the opportunity. Today, this plane is no longer a symbol of that painful memory. It's a beacon of hope. Through Davenport Skies, it will carry supplies to remote communities, bring volunteers to areas hit by disaster, and someday, I hope it will also carry children aspiring to change the world. Let this plane remind us that no act of hate is too large to overcome with unity, courage, and the unwavering belief that we all belong. The audience erupted in applause. Emily couldn't help but blink away tears, overwhelmed by pride in her grandmother. To inaugurate the plane's new mission, Clarissa announced a series of humanitarian flights to Central America, delivering medical equipment to clinics in rural areas. She invited Emily to join one of these flights the following summer, once Emily was on break from her new performing arts school. For Emily, the idea of stepping back on that plane triggered some trepidation. But she also felt a sense of triumph. She wanted to walk down the aisle of that aircraft, without fear, to demonstrate to herself and anyone watching that she had reclaimed her rightful space. As the months passed, Emily immersed herself in her dance training at the academy, excelling in ballet, jazz, and contemporary styles. Her teachers praised her discipline and emotional range, but behind her grace on stage, there remained the memory of that fateful flight, a memory that now served as a testament to her strength rather than her vulnerability. The day came for Emily's first humanitarian trip aboard N8445DS under the Davenport Skies banner. She boarded the plane with Clarissa, greeting the new flight crew with a calm smile. Gone was any sign of Captain Hallenbeck. In his place stood Captain Dana Waverly, a gentle, empathetic pilot with decades of experience. Before takeoff, Emily stepped into the cockpit to meet Captain Waverly. The pilot beamed at her. "I've heard quite the story about this plane, young lady. It's an honor to fly you and your grandmother today." Emily felt a lump in her throat, but managed to smile. "Thank you, Captain. I'm happy to be here." As she walked back to her seat, she ran a hand along the cabin's wall, remembering her earlier tears. This time, instead of fear, she felt gratitude and power. She settled into a seat near the front, not exactly first class, since the plane had been reconfigured, but a comfortable row nonetheless. Clarissa sat beside her, holding her hand in silent solidarity. When the engines roared and the plane sped down the runway, Emily closed her eyes, recalling everything that had transpired since that day: the pilot's bigotry, the cabin's silent shock, the unwavering support of a handful of strangers, and her grandmother's brilliant, determined response. In that moment, Emily felt unstoppable, and the vibration of the aircraft stirring beneath her feet felt like the heartbeat of a living testament to resilience. Touching down in a small airstrip in Guatemala, Emily and Clarissa disembarked, along with volunteers carrying boxes of medical supplies. Locals gathered around, cheering the arrival of much-needed equipment. Emily pitched in, helping to distribute smaller packages. She conversed with local children in broken Spanish, their eyes lighting up with curiosity when they learned she was a dancer. She even performed a brief dance number for them in the shade of the plane's wing, drawing laughter and applause. Clarissa watched from a short distance, her heart swelling with pride. This was precisely the outcome she had envisioned Emily turning a moment of adversity into a catalyst for broader compassion. The plane itself stood as a silent witness, once the stage of cruelty, now a backdrop to Emily's generosity and spirit. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, painting the horizon in oranges and reds, Clarissa reflected on the cosmic irony. The pilot who had tried to shame Emily out of first class inadvertently spurred the purchase of an entire plane devoted to uplifting communities. It was the kind of transformative justice that money alone couldn't buy, yet it required both resources and moral conviction. Back in Los Angeles, word of Clarissa's philanthropic flights spread further. Media outlets lauded her as a hero who had turned a painful incident into a powerful legacy. Though Clarissa remained humble, she used the attention to raise awareness about systemic racism, championing more robust diversity training in airlines and other service industries. Emily's acceptance into the Performing Arts Academy proved to be just the beginning of her rise. In the subsequent years, she landed roles in school productions, winning awards at local showcases. The memory of the flight incident still stung at times, but it also fueled her creativity. She choreographed a piece titled Wings Unbroken, which told the story of triumph over discrimination. When she performed it at her school's annual gala, the audience was moved to a standing ovation, and so Emily's personal experience paralleled the transformation of the Boeing 737. Both had been marked by prejudice, but emerged stronger and more radiant, carrying messages of courage and equality. In the grand tapestry of life, acts of cruelty often spark waves of compassion. For Clarissa and Emily, the confrontation with Captain Hallenbeck was a challenge that tested their grace and unity. But that same event crystallized a mission utilizing wealth and influence to serve justice, ensuring that a single hateful voice would not overshadow the inherent goodness of many. Davenport's skies continued to grow, adding more flights to disaster zones and remote communities. Clarissa used the refurbished 737 as a flagship for her philanthropic efforts. Over time, it became a legend in certain circles. Pilots and flight attendants spoke of the Davenport plane with admiration, while communities in far-flung corners of the globe came to associate it with hope and relief. Emily blossomed into a confident young dancer and performer, her experiences shaping her art. She never forgot that bigotry could lurk in unexpected places, but she also believed deeply in the capacity of individuals to stand up for each other. Her grandmother's example taught her that the best retaliation against hate was constructive creation, a principle Emily carried with her on stage in the studio and everywhere her life took her. Eventually, Emily would graduate from the Performing Arts Academy, landing a spot in a competitive dance program. On the day she departed for her new journey, Clarissa drove her to the airport. As they approached a terminal, Emily spotted a Davenport Skies plane parked nearby, its Dove logo shining in the sun. She smiled, remembering the old days, the old fear, and how it had all changed. With a tearful hug, Emily stepped toward security. Clarissa watched her go, heart brimming with gratitude. The cycles of prejudice and injustice continued in the world, but so did the cycles of bravery and redemption. A single flight had shown them both the worst and the best in humanity, and in harnessing the best they found their wings. In the end, one harrowing moment of bigotry sparked a chain reaction that transformed countless lives. A child's tears in first class reminded us all that prejudice can strike anywhere, even at 35,000 feet. But it also underscored the power of standing strong. From the ashes of that fateful flight rose a phoenix of compassion, a refurbished airplane now carrying hope, medical supplies, and volunteers to communities in need. This story is a testament to resilience, the bond between a grandmother and granddaughter, and the belief that no obstacle is insurmountable when faced with unity and moral courage. If you found inspiration in this journey, if it moved your heart or opened your eyes, please like this video, share it with friends who might need a reminder of humanity's kindness, and subscribe to our channel. Join us for more stories that prove time and again that light can outshine even the darkest of clouds. Thank you for watching.